All right. My name is Quinn Padilla. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I was inspired by another speaker to add some more personal information other than just my professional stuff up here. I'm a brain spotting therapist, an abuse recovery coach. I'm a content creator. I share my own personal journey on my social media, as well as advocate and for social and political justice. And I also share a lot about like abuse and abuse recovery and nervous system regulation. I'm also a mom of three, of a 14, a 13, and a 10-year-old preteen. And I'll say navigating teenagers in perimenopause. I don't know. Also giving this speech, if I forget what I'm saying, again, currently experiencing menopause. So if I like spontaneously combust or something too, I mean, nobody knows what's actually going on. I'm a CrossFit athlete and I've been a coach for 17 years. I like to lift really heavy stuff. So that's a fun little factoid about myself. I want to clarify that some of the language that I will be using today, and that is I will be using he, him for the abuser and she, her for the victim. This is not to be exclusionary. I know that abuse goes in all different directions, but to ignore the gendered reality of intimate partner violence is to ignore the facts of femicide. So I want to start by asking a quick question. If you guys feel comfortable, would you or have you or anybody that you know ever been in a relationship where you felt as if you're walking on eggshells? Anyone, right? Okay. All right. Keep your hands up, please. Would you keep them up if you would have labeled this as abusive?
At the time?
At the time. At the time. Okay. All right. That is the gap that I'm here to talk about today. I'm going to share some abuse statistics. I know we've been like flooded with them. Go next. Okay. Nearly half of all women will experience abuse in their lifetime, with statistics going up to 80% when including, quote, milder forms of abuse. I actually don't think there are any mild forms of abuse. There's just different kinds of abuse and different kinds of abusers. And I will say I've had clients who have been married to covert narcissistic abusers, and the damage that those men can do without ever raising their voice or lifting a fist is absolutely catastrophic. The United Nations has labeled home as the most dangerous place for a woman to be around the world. For women ages 15 to 24, homicide is the second leading cause of death in the United States. And for women ages 25 to 34, homicide is the third leading cause of death. In over half of these deaths, it is the current or former intimate partner. And another statistic to be aware of is there is a correlation between intimate partner violence and suicide. Survivors of abuse are 3 times more likely to attempt suicide than non-abused peers. Additionally, they say that about 25% plus, I think that plus is high, of female suicides are associated with intimate partner violence. And this last, hi, I'm so glad you're here. This last statistic like really shocked me, and it's one that very much stands out to me. And that is that homicide is the leading cause of death for pregnant and postpartum women, and the most likely suspect being their intimate partner. This is terrifying to me, to be honest. And all of these statistics, we're really truly looking at an epidemic that I know people are beginning to talk about, but it really isn't talked about enough. And women aren't just being killed acutely, they're also being killed slowly. Women account for 80% of all autoimmune diagnoses in the United States, with trauma and chronic stress now emerging as a primary explanation. We know that chronic exposure to abuse keeps the body in prolonged cortisol levels and nervous system dysregulation that's directly linked to lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, fibromyalgia, Hashimoto's, and multiple sclerosis. The ACE study has found a direct dose-response relationship between trauma exposure and autoimmune disease, meaning that the higher or the greater the abuse, the more severe and prolonged, the higher the risk. We know these things. And it's not that we were taught wrong or we have been taught wrong. We just haven't been taught enough. We haven't been given the language to really explain what it is that we are observing. So,
Oh, I keep messing up these slides.
So despite 75 to 80% of mental health professionals regularly encountering domestic violence, fewer than 25% report receiving adequate training. There are no equivalent screenings or standards for domestic violence the way that we screen for for suicide risk. And additionally, that question, I was talking to a girlfriend and I was like, oh, there's no screenings for domestic violence. She was like, well, my doctor asked me if I feel safe at home. And most women are probably going to say, yeah, I feel safe at home, because when we ask that question, we're typically referring to physical violence. And so a lot of women will say, like, yeah, he's not hitting me, he's not throwing things, he's not punching me. But that doesn't assess for the risk of the physical violence in a domestic violence situation or abusive situation is the tip of the iceberg. It really is so much of the financial abuse, the psychological abuse, the emotional abuse that's existing underneath the iceberg. And again, I have seen and met clients who their partner never even raised their voice to them, but yet caused extreme devastation. So this is where I've identified what I refer to as the caregiver trap. It's a clinical failure that happens when we pathologize the abuser instead of labeling the abuse. So when we tell a client, and this is a misconception, I guess, kind of across all areas, that abusive behavior is caused by mental illness or addiction. And the problem with that model is that when abusers want us to believe that the reason they are acting crazy, the reason why they lose control, the reason why they cause harm to us is because they're out of control, because they have anger issues, because they have addiction issues. And that may be true. They may have those problems on top of the fact that they are abusive. So they are operating from an abusive value system. And mental illness and addiction cannot explain abusive behavior because it's not the cause of abusive behavior. Unlike mental illness, a value system cannot be treated with mental health tools. We cannot EMDR our way out of entitlement, and we cannot medicate misogyny. A value system is chronic and statistically unlikely to change, and our clients deserve to know that. So I've also identified 3 ways where we inadvertently, with the best of intentions, cause harm to our clients. We pathologize the abuser. So this is the first one is the caregiver trap again. We label abusive behavior as PTSD, attachment issues. Oh, he's an avoidant. No, he's not. Maybe he is an avoidant, but he's also abusive at the same time, okay? And it removes accountability from the abuser. Mm-hmm. When a man can say, I did this because XYZ, it takes the focus off of him and puts it onto a label that we validate, again, when we label the behaviors, as when we remove the accountability from the abuser and put it onto the label, the diagnostic label. When we take a stance of neutrality, this is the one that I hear so very often when I have clients come to me that they have gone to couples counseling and they've sat down with their abusive partner, and the couples counselor takes a stance of neutrality. And it is so important to understand neutrality is not objectivity. When there is a victim and a perpetrator, siding with the perpetrator, taking a stance of neutrality is siding with the oppressor. It removes accountability and it denies the victim the validation they need. So that victim is coming to us, looking to us to say, you're in the wrong. You are being abusive with your actions and behavior. But when people say things like, well, there's 2 sides to the story, Everybody has their own, everybody has their part. When that can be so incredibly damaging to somebody who's sitting there who's been harmed repeatedly over and over again. And then guess what that abuser does when they go home? Well, she says it's both of us. She says we're both to blame in this situation. So you do your part. And an abuser loves to take that home. The last part is that we label symptoms without labeling the cause. So we pathologize the abuser, but we also pathologize the victim, and we say, well, you have anxiety, you have depression. And again, a lot of abusers weaponize therapy and therapeutic language. And so they send these women into therapy. You're crazy. You got to go to therapy. You're so depressed, you can't even do the laundry. You can't even take care of the kids. You can't even fill in the blank, right? And when we go in and we give them those diagnoses, which is fine, I diagnose my clients, but if we give them that without identifying, yeah, you have depression because you're living with a narcissistic asshole. Excuse me. The keynote was cussing, so I guess it gave me permission. We become complicit in the gaslighting. We validate the gaslighting that they have already been putting their victims through. We say, yeah, you are depressed. Yeah, you are anxious. Yeah, maybe, you're having all these problems in your relationship because of you're the problem. Again, abusers love that. So when I mentioned that, and I'm going to go over these like pretty quick, what causes abuse is the abusive value systems. And all of these, there's many different value systems that I believe abusers operate from. If you read Lundy Bancroft's book, Why Does He Do That? It's an excellent book. He goes into great depth. These are the abusive value systems I see most prominently in abusers and the ones that tend to give the best explanation. Welcome. I'm so glad you're here. Okay, they give the best explanation. So I'm just going to go over them really quick. So entitlement, which is the foundation of any abuser, somebody who is operating from an entitled value system. And I believe entitlement in general is kind of like what's wrong with the world all around, not just in abusive, people. It's the belief that they have the right to behave however they want without consequence. And it's the unwillingness to tolerate frustration. They believe they shouldn't have to experience discomfort. They're like, I'm entitled to this life. I shouldn't have to be uncomfortable. Selfishness is a huge one. And I define it as the unwillingness to experience discomfort in order to be in relationship with another person. Healthy relationships require sacrifice and compromise, and an abuser refuses both. Misogyny, again, in our current social and political environment, this is the most terrifying to me, because if we're identifying that abusers operate from an abusive value system, and this is what's being seen by all of the young men in our country, we're in trouble. Like, we already saw domestic violence rates spike during COVID, and now we have this. Again, this is terrifying. Misogyny, as you guys might know, is a deeply held belief in male superiority combined with a contempt for women. It's both individual and societal value system. And then lastly, objectification. This is the belief that women are not fully human. They can be owned, possessed, and controlled. And they have a right to dictate every part of a woman's life. So when you're looking at a person that's in a relationship that you're like, is their partner maybe abusive? And again, you might not be clinicians, but maybe you have friends that are in relationships like this, or you yourself are in a relationship like this. And when you look at the value system lens, look at that person through these things. Are they exhibiting these things? And you can look at little small parts of this. How does somebody treat a waiter? Entitlement, right? If they feel, that is a huge one. Or if somebody feels entitled to your body, entitled to your time, entitled to, again, feeling like, are they selfish? Are they unwilling to make themselves, I don't really want to you really wanted me to do the laundry, but I really want to sit and play video games. So that's, right? That causes harm in a relationship. So I understand this because I personally went through it. I was married for 10 years to a Green Beret who I thought was just an asshole. I thought he had PTSD, and he did. He had PTSD. He had anger issues and alcohol problems. We went through 7 deployments. We had 3 children, and I lived under a constant threat of suicide. That was his main weapon of control. Oh, you're going to leave? I'm going to kill myself. That was what kept me in it. And I was terrified because the fear was very real. Again, he had PTSD. He had alcohol problems. I was so scared. We went through 4 marriage therapists. I developed come in. You want to come in? Come on in. 3, this is important. 3 individual therapists and multiple pastors. Not one of them named abuse because he wasn't hitting me. And so, come on, sit down. All right, again, this is important. Not one of them named the abuse. Everybody focused on his PTSD, childhood trauma, communication issues. How are you being a good wife? Don't nag him so much. He's been on a deployment. All of these things. I was given horrendous advice, like, never go to bed angry, which was a way that my ex-husband used to psychologically abuse me because he would keep me up all night fighting. I couldn't go to sleep because he would keep me up all night. That's one that some people are not familiar with. That abuse tactic is how they will disorient you. They will keep you tired. They will keep you confused and exhausted. In 2017, I escaped with my 3 children. I still did not know that I was in an abusive relationship. I just knew that I had to leave. And naturally, what does one do with, crippling anxiety, but enroll in a master's program to study it for 3 years? They say research is me search. I was still trying to understand what was wrong with him. I thought that if I could get the right diagnosis, I could finally understand, okay, he's borderline combo with, I don't know. I was still trying to figure it out. It's gonna make me emotional. In 2020, my ex-husband died by suicide.
Sorry.
He shot himself in front of his new wife of 7 months. And it was at that point that I discovered I was in an abusive relationship, but not because of this. I found out the way most women find out these days that they're in an abusive relationship. Do you guys have a guess? That's right. Scrolling on Instagram, I found a page that finally gave me the language that I needed to define and understand my experience. Come on in. Everybody needs to be here.
Yes.
In 10 minutes.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Finish, please, and then you can come in. Thank you.
Come on, come sit down. You can join. Oh, that's okay. All right. And this is where it's important that we have to hold 2 truths. We need to understand the nuance and the complexity of abusive relationships. He had PTSD. He struggled with addiction. He had anger problems, and he was abusive. His death was a tragedy and a final act of violence against his wife and his family. So why do we miss it? When we don't know what we're looking at, we cannot find it. If we are looking at our friends, our families, our clients, and we have no conceptualization of what abuse is, how are we going to tell them what they're experiencing? We don't know. We have to redefine and understand abuse and understand it from the views of an abusive values system. Again, we can get really distracted and disoriented by the diagnoses and miss that they're abusive at the foundation, because we're trained to search for pathology. And lastly, we may be experiencing abusive relationships myself. I was a clinician. I was fully in grad school, seeing clients in my clinical hours, still not knowing that I myself had been in an abusive relationship and was like subsequently enduring post-separation abuse. I had no idea. So I don't have time to go over this. The why doesn't she just leave? She has no idea. She doesn't understand the cycle of abuse. She doesn't know that he's operating from an abusive value system and is unlikely to change. He's not going to change because it's not a mental health issue. It's a value system issue. And that is so important for our clients and our friends to understand because, again, unlike depression, unlike addiction, you can treat those with mental health tools. You can't change a value system. Some people, it is a very, very, very small percentage chance that you're going to change that person's value system. And so I kill that little bit of hope. I squash it for my clients because it's that little bit of hope that keeps them saying, well, maybe I can change him. Maybe it's going to be different this time. He's going to go to therapy. That is the new get out of jail free card, right? I'm going to go to therapy. I'm going to change. And then what happens, right? Maybe the behavior, maybe he's not as angry, but he's still a misogynist. He's still entitled. He's still selfish, right? Because that therapy doesn't treat those things. This is a lot, but trauma bonds are a thing. Go look them up. I don't have time to talk about it because then we have the next presenter. But if you guys want to talk about it, I could, talk for another hour about trauma bonds there. So, all right. So I'm going to leave you with this. I spent 10 years in an abusive relationship. I saw 7 therapists. I got my master's in social work, and I still didn't know that I was being abused until I found a reel on Instagram that gave me the language. When I finally had the words, everything changed. When I finally understood what I was dealing with, everything made sense. And when I finally labeled the abuse for my clients, it's what allows them to be free. That's what naming abuse does. It gives women back their reality. We're sitting in one of the most prestigious rooms in the country. We have training, we have the platform, we have the access, and the women in our offices and in our lives are counting on us to know what we're looking at. Don't let them sit in confusion. Don't let them blame themselves. Name the abuse. It might be the most important thing you ever do. Those are my references if you need them. And I'm very active on Instagram is my favorite platform to connect with people with. So that is, please connect with me there. Send me a message. What's that?
Source the references.
Oh, yeah. Now they're real. Unfortunately, they were, oh yeah, and questions. We got 5 minutes.
Can you share what you saw on Instagram that helped you understand that you were in an abusive relationship?
It really was a lot of the value system thing was like such a breakthrough for me because I did have, again, my ex-husband had a lot of mental health issues. And so that was like such a massive distraction for me. I was trying to figure it out. I got my undergrad in psychology and then my master's in social work. And I was like, what's wrong with his brain, and trying to figure it out. And when I found, being a caretaker, and that's what the clinicians I saw like also kind of put me into that space too, because they would also label it. And so I was like, oh, this is a PTSD issue. This is a deployment issue. This is a military guy issue thing.
Were there resources at all in the VA? I used to work in the VA system.
Yeah.
I didn't really see a lot of services for people.
For the spouses?
Yeah.
There's not. I mean, that's like, and even now, again, it's 2026 and we still we don't have the resources that we need for people who are experiencing intimate partner violence. The knowledge isn't there